cool. So I thought I'd just explain a few little things surrounding volume. I've got my iPad set up here. You can see it's right down here. And I'm just going to explain a few things. So people often talk about volume, and they talk about volume like, oh, I'm doing high volume today, I'm doing volume this, I'm doing volume that. I'm going to do a low volume session. Or like, oh, I don't like using volume. That would be the wrong way to talk about volume. So volume is actually something we can measure. We can measure volume when we're talking in hypertrophy training. And it's a really important concept to learn for a few reasons. So manipulating volume is a whole nother ball game. That's another very complex topic that I'll probably explain in a future video. But just understanding what volume actually is a really important first step. So volume is effectively a unit of training. So basically what we mean by that is it just measures something. It measures how much training we're doing. It doesn't necessarily measure the adaptations from training. That's a whole nother discussion. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation between volume and training stress. So training stress and volume are two different things. However, you can measure it in the number of hard sets. So what would we class as a hard set? You have an RPE. So an RPE is a rate of perceived exertion, primarily thought out or very well thought out by Mike Toucher, Eric Helms, and Mike Zordo. So they pioneered RPE. So RPE is basically a scale on 1 to 10 of how difficult it was. A 9 RPE means you had one more rep in the tank. A 10 RPE means you had no more reps in the tank. A hard set is anything from a 6 RPE, which is 4 reps left, all the way until you've got 0 RIR, or reps in reserve. Zero RIR, 0 reps in reserve. So all the way to a 10 RPE. Any sets where you do that, that's classed as a hard set. So that would be one hard set. If you did one set within that RPE range. And then you would calculate how many sets. Usually we measure volume on a weekly basis. That's sort of the most important measure. However, we also do measure volume on basically a session basis and also a muscle group basis. So generally you'll hear words thrown around like MRV. The MRV stands for maximum recoverable volume. So that's the maximum amount of volume that you can do while recovering from it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should do that amount of volume. It's just that's how many hard sets you can do. That's generally how Mike tends to measure volume, is in number of hard sets. Although I wouldn't want to misquote Mike, but I believe that's what he classes it as from the conversations we've had. And then so that's the main way that people like to measure it. They mainly like to measure volume in number of hard sets. However, you can also measure volume load, as in volume load, which is sets times reps. So sets, that's not a good highlighter color, is it? What can I use for this? So sets times reps times weight. So what that basically means is if you had one set, you did 12 reps, 10 kgs, that'd be 120 kgs volume load. Although I'm unsure if that's the specific unit that we like to use. You don't really need to worry about this form of measuring volume, because this form of measuring volume is more likely used in either powerlifting. I focus on hypertrophy, so gaining muscle specifically. You don't really need to worry about this method of measuring volume too much. I don't find that it's too important. But it's mainly used in sort of research and powerlifting settings. For hypertrophy training, number of hard sets generally tends to work. The main reason for that is the rep range that's useful for hypertrophy is quite wide. So the rep range we can use for hypertrophy really is anything from sort of 5, even 1 rep could work. However, there's logistical problems at the lower rep ranges. So anything from sort of a 5 to 6 all the way up to a 30, and then potentially even above that. You want to in your program, you want to have a range of rep ranges, but that's a topic for another day. So now we've kind of outlined what volume is, we've kind of outlined you can measure volume. It's basically number of hard sets. That is how much volume you're doing. But another question is how much volume is actually optimal. And this is a complex one because volume, it changes quite a lot. This is a graphic that I made on my Instagram, the Hypertrophy Hub. Link that somewhere on the screen right now. You can see it down here. So what's interesting, there's many things that are interesting about this, but basically in this area, that's where you're going to be making the most gains. And this could be any number of sets, but it depends on the individual. So if you're a absolute beginner, one set is probably this area. So for instance, if you've just finished your quarantine in coronavirus, one set is probably in this area as well. And then 5 sets might be in this area. And I'm talking on a per muscle group basis now. So when I say one set, I mean one set. Let's just, for instance, just for simplicity's sake, let's talk about quads. So just for quadricep hypertrophy, I could have picked any muscle group for this. I could have said back, I could have said biceps, I could have said triceps, anything, doesn't matter. So just for simplicity, let's talk about quadricep hypertrophy. So what might be optimal for a beginner is likely like 1 set per week. For the very, very first week, just start at 1 set per week. And then from there, we can begin to add sets all the way to advanced. Which might be looking at a lot more, so anywhere from sort of 10 to 20 sets per week. However, that can change a lot. For instance, a lot of the time I'll be doing, like I believe in my previous program, I was doing something like 8 sets of quads per week, and I was making relatively good quadricep gains. I was doing a frequency of twice per week. By frequency, I just mean how often I'm training my quads. I was training them 4 sets a session, and that's quite a low volume on quads. However, as you get to more advanced intermediate, you're looking at that kind of range. However, that's terrible handwriting. But your volume doesn't actually have to go up over time, or at least your number of hard sets doesn't. However, this is where volume load gets interesting, because volume load generally should go up over time. So generally we are looking to have volume load rise over time. Why is that? Basically, as hypertrophy occurs, and all of this is speaking in the context of hypertrophy, as volume load goes up, as you achieve hypertrophy, so hypertrophy is somewhat similar to work capacity. And in general, you will be able to, so one component of this is how much weight you're using. So generally, you will be getting stronger. So in general, weight will increase over time. So over time, as increased hypertrophy, so increased hypertrophy or increased the size of the muscle fiber will increase. So this will lead to increased strength. So when I say strength, I don't mean 1 rep max strength, although that may also increase. More what you're going to be looking at is more your ability to be strong across multiple rep ranges. Now there is many components of strength, but once those other components are controlled for, like one of the main components is just how much you've actually done the movement, how attenuated are you to that movement. Once those are controlled for, or you look at the variability in strength between individuals, the main component actually does end up being hypertrophy, or the size of someone's muscles, cross-sectional area, we like to call it in the research. Not that I'm a researcher yet. But yeah, that's generally what we like to call it. We like strength and hypertrophy are relatively correlated. But yeah, so that's why volume load can be important. Volume load should rise over time. But in terms of an actual practical programming sense, you don't really ever need to worry about volume load. It never really comes into the equation. Not that there needs to be any equations here. So with programming for clients, I mainly just use number of hard sets. I actually only use number of hard sets, really, because there's not really any reason to calculate volume load, because I program for my clients primarily for hypertrophy. If they have strength goals, I will program differently for them. But for most of my clients, they come to me because they want to achieve, they want to get jacked, they want to get gains, etc., etc. So that's generally what we're aiming for. And then, so what does this curve actually mean? So like over here in this area of the curve, it says suboptimal, you're likely not adapting at all. So Mike Ejitel's volume landmarks are really, really useful. They're a really good understanding to move forward from. I think they're not without flaw, the theory. However, I think people are misunderstanding it when they with those flaws. I think Mike's actual explanation of it, I think the application commonly gets flawed. I don't think the theory is flawed. So I hope that makes sense. So when it says suboptimal, you're likely not adapting at all. That's basically because you're not getting enough training stress to cause an adaptation. And then over here, you have to actually adapt. So we have this thing called muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis will rise after you finish a workout. However, also does muscle protein breakdown. And the ratio of each to each other is largely determined by how much muscle damage you've caused. So mechanical tension will cause, so let's just call that, so mechanical tension, we'll just call it MT equals MPS a rise. So mechanical tension is a whole nother concept that I'll go into later in another video, but mechanical tension equals a muscle protein synthesis rise. But muscle damage generally equals a muscle protein breakdown rise. So basically what that means is you have to kind of be in a balance of these areas. So if you're not in a balance of those areas, this area basically is optimal. But the problem here is, this is why I say it's complicated, because the greater application and the figuring out where you are is a lot more complicated. We can't really use muscle soreness as a gauge to figure out where we are on this curve, because it seems to generally be a lot more complicated than that. So in another video, I will explain a little bit more about this, but I hope you enjoyed this kind of, this is my first time doing this kind of video, but yeah, if you did enjoy this video, please let me know. If you do think there's other things that you would like me to cover, please let me know as well, because it's something that, or there's anything that it's not quite making sense here, because I haven't really done much. I've not done zero formal teaching. I'm just kind of spewing my thoughts onto the page here. So yeah, let me know if this makes sense. Please like and subscribe. If you did want to figure out where to find me, my Instagram, so I just go IG, is Hypertrophy Hub. So if you search Hypertrophy Hub, it's a nice blue logo. That one there, that lovely logo. And you'll see infographics like these. So yeah, if you did like to find that out, go follow me there on Hypertrophy Hub. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Furthermore, If you would like to get some coaching from me, I do offer online coaching services. A lot of my client testimonials are on my Instagram page over at the Hypertrophy Hub. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and please leave any feedback if you do have any.